Welcome, Off Season After Dark fans. Glad to have you here for episode 35. And we venture to the ACC today. We have Jack here from Cavalier Connection. We will talk Wahoo offseason and football, one of the teams who was a pleasant surprise last year. So, Jack, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what got you into the space, how long you've been a Cavalier fan, and where they can find you. And as always, I'll always tag you in everything and make it easily accessible for everybody viewing so they can give you easy follows.
Yeah, Mike, I really appreciate you having me on today. And the answer to the question, how long I've been a fan, well, that'd be all 19 years of life. All night. I came out the womb and my parents had me in a little UVA onesie. So,
and Al Groh was probably coaching then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And here's the thing. Nobody in my bloodline is smart enough to get into UVA, but it just gets passed down. You know, I've been a fan my whole life. We started our podcast back in the fall of 2023, which was the year after the tragedy happened. It was a terrible season. They were awful. They won 3 games that year. But we kind of started it, fan-based podcast. We could let out it was like therapy. We were frustrated after games, come on there and complain about everything. Yeah. And now it's evolved. We have our, website. We're credentialed through the university. And it's a lot of fun. You can find it all, the Cavalier Connection on YouTube, all of our podcast episodes, all of our interviews with athletes and recruits and whatnot. And then also our website, thecavalierconnection.com, new and approved. I worked really hard to get it rolling. And now we've got message boards on there and articles and all sorts of stuff. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I made the comment on X about the Cavaliers are the secondary fan base of all biscuit eaters. And the story behind that is Biscuits and SEC are 2 of the guys that I collaborate with and do our group show with, Hammer and Bossman. They're brothers who do a Texas A&M focused podcast, but they grew up in the Charlottesville area. So they actually do like UVA a lot and have family out there. So it's not just, like I did just say, they actually do like the Cavs, and we're happy that I was having one of you guys on the show today.
Yeah, that's really great. We're a part of what we're doing too is trying to grab the fan base and centralize it. It's been known over the last Virginia was so irrelevant for so long. The fan base has kind of been lost a little bit, but now starting last year, you started to see. That Florida State field rush, you saw the fan base kind of come together. They were loud. It was almost a sold out crowd, and beyond the entire season. So. That's a part of what we do too. Try and, bring everybody together, bring the community together and say, hey, let's support this team. Let's buy tickets. Let's support the team. Let's go show up and be loud. Because we're trying to change the narrative of, that fan base is not very good.
And you'll certainly keep the fans excited when you have 4 overtime games in 1 year.
Oh, my goodness. So. Tell me. And what's worse than that is when you sit in the press box watching all of those games and you're not allowed to cheer. You can't show any emotion.
I suppose, yeah.
And you've got overtime games. And, oh, my goodness, we had too many of them last year. And, of course, the last one came in the ACC championship, and you're not able to get it done. But overall, 3-0 in overtime games during the regular season, that's as exhilarating as it gets.
Absolutely. And, 2 of them were, Florida State struggled. At the time, they were playing all right when you guys beat them. And Louisville was one of the better teams in the conference. They're always going to be good with Jeff Brom, I'm convinced. And then you got, one of your rivals, UNC, in the other one in the regular season. So is it it's the South's oldest rivalry, right? That one we were talking about.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
because it's funny. That was on with the Biscuits guys. They were talking. It was I think that's the South's oldest rivalry, and Georgia Auburn is the Deep South's oldest rivalry.
I think that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, but let's circle back a little bit. So last year obviously a revelation, but prior to that, Tony Elliott had really struggled. The first 2 years were both 3-win seasons. And I'll be the first to say, in looking at the coaching carousel and writing about that as one of my main niches in the sport, I was iffy on his hire when they made the hire. And then through 3 years, I didn't really like what he was doing. Then we got to last year, and I was actually kind of bullish on them because in preseason stuff, you looked at, okay, they were predicted to get, it was either 4.5 or 5.5 wins. But then you look at the schedule, and I was like, oh, they're going to hit the over here because that schedule is really easy, and their roster is going to be a lot better. They're a lot more talented. And that's exactly what happened. So I gave Elliott a lot of credit last year when I had been a big hater of his prior to last year. So I will eat crow on that one. And hopefully he can keep it going. I still want to see when we, with a tougher schedule, if you can sustain it for more than a year, but he certainly has them going in the right direction right now.
He does, and I would 100% get the criticism because he did struggle those first few years. That first year, that 2022, coming off of the Bronco Mendenhall era, there was so much talent that remained on that roster, and you only win 3 games. You almost lost to Old Dominion. You got a field goal at the end of the game to win it, and you wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I will mention very briefly the tragedy at the end of 2022. It cut out the last couple games.
Yeah.
No, listen, that. I don't care what you say. That's so tough for any coach, whether they're doing well or bad. And I'm not making excuses for him, but
and my thing, Matt, was you're absolutely right. You can't imagine what that would be like.
Oh my goodness,
they weren't lighting the world on fire on the field before that. They weren't having a good year anyway. But there's nothing in the playbook for how do we move forward from that either.
Yeah, I mean, he's going into recruits' houses. He's not talking about, why he would fit at the school. He's telling parents if he can keep them safe. I mean, this is stuff that's come out about it all. And, you lose 3 of your players and, that locker room. But it sort of became a rallying cry. The following year, again, he didn't have much of an offseason because half the offseason was dealing with the tragedy. So 2023 was rough. You start the year off with a loss to JMU. They also played Tennessee to start that season.
I remember Tennessee just rolled them in week 1. Yeah.
It was a neutral site game in Nashville, and Tennessee absolutely had their way.
That's right, because it was at Nissan. Yeah. Okay.
It was. And so
and then you got throttled by a Maryland team, which was probably the best team Mike Loxley has had.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is they were tied in that game in the third quarter. People forget 14-14. And when I tell you wheels,
I totally forgot about that too.
Well, when the wheels fell off, They gave up like 30-something straight points in the fourth quarter. It was ugly. But that wasn't the only game. There's a lot of games that season where Virginia would be in the game till the end against good teams. Louisville's the big one that comes to my head. Louisville was like number 13 in the country, something like that. They had them on the ropes until the end, and then they folded and choked away.
Yeah. You go 3-9, but you beat a team who at the time was in the top 10 in North Carolina.
Yeah, so, and that's it didn't make much sense. But there was a lot of criticism for Elliott going into last season. And I absolutely understand it, and I somewhat agreed. But the transfer portal class that Virginia brought in entering last year was so good, and albeit before the portal class, there were some big NIL contributions, some big donations. I don't know how much the national media understands that, but there were some big time money people kind of helped save the program, if you will. And they brought in a really good transfer portal class. And I'm the same way as you. I looked at last year's schedule before the year. I'm like, that's a win. That's a win. That's a win. That's winnable. I mean, it was a very, very doable schedule. And I told people, I'm like, Virginia's going to be good this year. I didn't think ACC championship. And they believed all year long. They told us, hey, we're going to Charlotte. I didn't believe that, but I believe they'd be, an 8-win, 9-win team. And albeit, I mean, he found a way to win all those football games. And I really appreciate him as Coach Elliott as a person. And that's something that'll get in the way sometimes when I'm talking about him. He is such a good person. He builds the programs the right way. And we talk to high school recruits who commit to the program. And one of the first reasons they say they committed is, oh man, my mom loved Coach Elliott. He makes sure to take care of me, make sure everything's good. He's a really personable guy. And, I'm a sucker for that. He's for being a great person. And then he's turned out to be a good ball coach last year. So like you said, it's going to be interesting to see if he can do it again this coming year. It's kind of an easy schedule, but it's a bit tougher than last season. So it's going to be really intriguing to see how that goes.
Yeah, we got the week 0 in Brazil.
Oh man, listen, that's a crazy game to open the year, and I'm not a fan of playing in week 0. I'd rather sit back and watch the other big game happen and worry about week 1 when it comes. But man, against NC State, CJ Bailey, go ahead.
Is week 1 one of your buys now, or are they both later in the year?
Week 1 is one of our buys.
Week 1.
So.
Okay, I'm trying to find. And then the first Saturday in November is the other buy. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
That's actually a good time to have a buy because everybody's beat up then. So
that's a great time.
You got to buy, and then your Cal, UNC at Vatech. That's a good time to get a week to heal.
That's a really good buy. I love having a late season buy because of that. Because a couple years ago, there was a season where their last buy was in the early to middle of the season. They were getting beat up the whole second half of the season. Yeah. But that NC State game, you're going to play returning CJ Bailey, a dynamic, quarterback at NC State. And, it's that's going to be a big game down the stretch with ACC records. That could end up being, a deciding factor. And the game will count in conference play this year. Last year it did not. That's a whole nother story. But this year will count in Brazil. Yeah. But what, man? And then you go to play Norfolk State at home for your home opener 2 weeks later, which I'd rather that be the opening game. Let's ease our way into the schedule. I don't want to play a big one week 0,
Mm-mm. I know I've been taught. So one of the guys I do my group show with and then can collaborate with him is once a week. I do the Lockdown Vandy, and they also play Delaware next year. So we've talked at lengths about the Blue Hens and what they're going to look like. And, you guys got them it's your 4th game, I believe. So it's probably it would be week 4 because of the week 1 bye. But yeah. But relative to G6 teams, they were competitive in year 1 in the FBS. And Nick Minicucci, who they returned at QB, is a pretty good QB. So that should be a fun game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But let's talk a bit about the offseason. I know the question I have, and presumably most of our listeners who aren't in the nitty-gritty of Virginia football, is Bo Pribula or Eli Holstein going to be the QB?
Yeah, it's a valid question. And initially, when they were both recruited and committed, the initial thought is Pribula starting. And then Holstein committed. And if you ask Coach Elliott, it's still a battle. I do think that the coaching staff is truly believe, but I am a firm believer it will be Pribula. Obviously, he's done it at a higher level. Holstein, struggled early last season, got benched.
Very hit and miss, He was not consistent.
No, he wasn't. He got benched for Herschel. How you pronounce his name?
Mason Heinzel. Yeah,
Heinzel. That's it. And, he was a bit inconsistent. And Pribula, man, he's so fast. I'm sure you've seen his Missouri tape, how quick he can accelerate out of the pocket. And it's going to be kind of a similar play style to Chandler Morris from last year, but much quicker. And he has an arm, too. He has a rocket for an arm. He can launch the ball. We got a very small sample size this past Saturday at the spring game. We didn't see much. He threw 2 of 4 for 40 yards, and then he accelerated out the pocket a time or two. But
I did some, looking, into the box and reading about your spring game, and that my takeaway was we learned almost nothing about the QB Smith game.
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't learn much, and that you don't really expect to either. You don't want anybody playing any longer than they need to. But I do
not like our friends at Biscuits and SEC, whose best linebacker had to get carted off in an air cast because he snapped his leg.
Oh no, that's terrible. But I think it's a competition, but I do believe it'll be Pribula. And hey, Holstein's still got some years of eligibility. This is it for Pribula. This is his final year. And I do believe he'll be the guy, and I think he can fill that void too that Chandler Morris is leaving.
Yeah, I also think it'll help you guys that both of your coordinators are back in Des Kitchings and Rudzinski. So when I went to South Carolina for grad school, my first year there was Kitchings. He was coaching running backs under Will Muschamp there. So that was his last year second to last year at USC. And then Rudzinski's been a solid DC. I'll be very curious for him in a couple years when Troy Calhoun, who is aging, retires at Air Force, if Rudzinski's a candidate for that head job, because you played at Air Force, coached there for 15 plus years. If they keep winning at UVA and his defenses are good, he'll have to be a strong candidate for that job.
Absolutely. I think he's going to be a candidate either way for any job before too long. If he keeps, the way the defense rallied last year, people forget how UVA's offense struggled a ton down the stretch. The defense kept them alive in so many football games that they shouldn't have been. And that's a testament to what Coach Rudd has done. And he's been a solid core. Even the years where Virginia wasn't very good that he was there, he's had the defense consistently keeping the Cavaliers in games, keeping them from getting ran away with. And he's been I love Coach Rudd. They call him Coach Rudd is his nickname. And he's consistently put out a good product every year. And we've got a lot of new faces on the defense this year with the transfer portal, but that's the same way it was last year, and he was able to pull it all together.
Good. Let's get into the roster a little bit more. We talked about the QB there. At running back, brought in multiple transfers. Is Peyton Lewis going to be the guy, or do you expect Ja'Kale Middlebrook are they going to split carries? What's that room going to look like?
So I'll say this. You mentioned us bringing in a lot of guys. You could not say that with more emphasis. They brought, this running back room could be 6 backs deep. I'm talking, there's probably the bottom half of our depth chart with running back can probably start on other Power 4 level schools. It's a really good room. And that's probably the biggest storyline that came out of the spring game because we got a small sample size of every single guy. I do believe Peyton Lewis and Middlebrook will be the top 2 guys and then there's another level. And I think they're going to split the carries. The last year, Jamari Taylor kind of was the workhorse. After the first few weeks, he turned into the number 1 guy. I think this coming year, it's going to be split a lot. And then there's still so much talent. Xavier Brown returns again for Virginia after having the injury last year. He's in year 5
a while. Yep.
Yeah. And then there's a couple others. I have a little cheat sheet in front of me.
One guy I wanted to ask about because I couldn't find a definitive answer. Is Harrison Whaley done?
Yeah.
He was very good at Wyoming. I thought he would do more last year for you guys, and he really didn't.
I thought so too. And he was out for a couple weeks with an injury. But I think Jamari Taylor kind of took that workhorse role, and the coaching staff really loved what they had with him. And Whaley still got in a little bit, but he didn't get as much time as me included. I thought he'd get a little bit more as well. He was really active in the first few weeks, but after that, he kind of fell off a little bit. But Noah Vaughn's a returning running back. He's been injured a lot in his career. I don't know how much he's going to get. And then Solomon Beebe is a name I wanted to mention.
All from UAB, yes.
Yeah, he got a lot of action in the spring game. He looked really good, and he could also play receiver. He's a good hybrid guy. Could be a kick returner, punt returner. There's just so many different directions the coaching staff can go. Coach Kitch can go in this running back room. We're talking 2 running backs in every play. Maybe you could do whatever you want. Really, it's a very stacked room. It's a good problem to have.
One of the guys I was excited to see you guys get, who was one because of fantasy reasons and whatnot last year. I was a big Jaquan Gibson fan at UMass. He was a target monster, had almost 100 targets last year. They were an abomination of a team at UMass, but he was actually really good. And that, 95 targets, he only played in 10 games. So, you're looking at almost 10 targets a game. Plus, you got Deshaun Martin from Kent State, who their team was way better than we thought they would be. And then Tyson Davis, the slot from Central Michigan. So that whole receiver room is going to look new. But I think they're all good guys.
Yeah, they're all brand new, and there's a lot of talent there for sure. Jaquan Gibson has some potential for sure, but I'll say this: he dropped a punt return in the spring game, so I don't know how I feel about him right now. No,
okay.
I'm sure he'll be fine. It's only spring ball. But you got him, and then also I will mention there's a lot of young talent that's returning from year 1 last year. Dylan Newton-Short's one of them, Josiah Abdullah and Isaiah Robinson. Those are the main three.
Is Cameron Courtney still back? He was all right.
And Cam Courtney is back. Yeah, he initially entered the portal, and then he announced he was returning after. He's probably going to be the slot guy if I had to guess. And he's a really consistent piece. This is year 3 for him, and he's gotten playing time all 3 seasons. So, but Dylan Newton-Short, Josiah Abdullah, and Isaiah Robinson, and then one other name, Dylan Cope as well. So there's a lot of receivers, and Coach Elliott told us after the spring game, I mean, we're going to be like 8 receivers traveling with the team every single game, and he's going to plan to use all 8, and there's so much versatility there for sure. So again, just like the running back room, there's so many different directions you can go. I'm curious where he'll choose to go.
Yeah, it's good to know. I can't say I know much about your tight end room, other than one of the guys I did notice transferred there was Connor Cox, who was with the Tar Heels last year, but he was at the Gamecocks before when I was there. So
one name I'll mention, Dakota Twitty. I try to preach this to UVA fans. Not all of them listen. He was such a big piece of the offense last year, and he went down when we played at Louisville. He went down, and ever since he went down, the offensive production went down. And his versatility, he was a receiver. He was a receiver turned tight end. Last year was his first year ever playing tight end. And so he's so quick. He's such a mismatch nightmare. And he's such a good run blocker, too. Considering he switched from receiver to tight end, he is a really good run blocker. And so Virginia really loved to run 12 personnel with Dakota Twitty and Sage Ennis last year as a good pass catcher. But when Twitty went down, we kind of lost that versatility. So this year, Twitty's coming back. He looked really healthy during the spring game. And then also John Rogers, he was a freshman last year. He got some good playing time. He's a good pass catcher. So we'll see a lot of Rogers, I'm sure. And then Twitty's going to be that guy. And then, like you mentioned, the guy from North Carolina, I expect him to get into the rotation a little bit too as a good run blocker as well.
Okay. Now, the O-line could be a question. I believe they're replacing all 5 guys from the homework I did. So that is replacing all 5 is a similar conversation to our friends at Biscuits and SEC that I've had with the Aggies. So what do you expect up front with the O-line? I know Alex Payne had been a very good recruit at USC and is there now. Expect he'll be at one of the tackle spots. And then Ryan Brubaker, another one of my fellow Gamecocks, probably will play on the inside. Couldn't tell you about who the other 3 O-linemen will be, though.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, and I understand why you would think otherwise, because they're all so old, but we actually returned quite a bit because it's all weird. Virginia gets some extra eligibility sometimes because COVID is still lingering somehow, and then the tragedy actually gave an extra year. So that gave a lot of extra time.
I forgot about that.
And I don't blame you at all. If I didn't follow the program so closely, I would just assume everybody's gone. But they're actually returning some big names. Noah Josie is coming back. I'm trying to find his name here so I can tell you what year, because he's been here for a good
and he was and the thing I was looking at said he graduated and wasn't back, but at left guard, so I thought he was done.
No, he's back for year 6, so it's not like he's played 4 years.
Is Jack Whitmer done at right tackle, or is he back as well? Because I thought he was also done.
I think Whitmer is one of the few that are done, but Drake Metcalf is back. He was a big piece. He's going to play center this year for the Wahoos. And then a big name at right that will be playing right tackle. He went down during the spring last year or during fall camp. I don't know. Monroe Mills. He played at Louisville the year before, and he was a really high-sought recruit that never got to play last year. So he's back. That's a big piece. And then McKeelan Thomas is another one. He'll probably play left tackle, who went down during fall camp last year. He's finally getting to play now. It's actually one of the most experienced offensive lines, I'd argue, in the entire country. Mikhail Boley's also back as well. It's just a matter of bringing it together.
Boley's another one that it said he graduated on the list I was looking at. So
and I know why it's confusing because
I know Mills was a guy who was a big pickup because he had started at New Mexico, then was at Louisville last year.
Yep, exactly. And we're really excited to see him play. He was moving really well the other day at the spring game, so I'm glad to see him healthy. Just put him in bubble wrap. I don't want him to get hurt again.
Okay. No, I'm glad you cleared that up though, because O-line wise, I did not know all of that.
Mm-hmm.
D-line wise, I feel like that's where they brought in a ton of guys.
They did
in the portal. I know Matt Fobbs-White came in from Baylor. I've talked about Baylor a few times. Then Zion Wilson, who was very good at ECU.
Yep.
And the edge from UTSA, I'm blanking on his name, and even if I did know his name, I'm not sure I could pronounce it accurately.
It's Nana Onuanu, something like that. I can't pronounce it correctly yet either. I'm still working on it.
Yep. Yep.
I'm still.
And then and then I remember there was a Jonathan Allen, I think, UAB guy.
Mm-hmm. Not the one in the NFL. A different Jonathan Allen.
No. But all guys who, they all played in double-digit games. They were all playing 11 to 13 games last year, so it's not like these guys were portaling and, sat on the bench. They played a lot of football.
Yeah, they did. And, the D-line was so good last year for Coach Rudzinski, and something that I think he'll incorporate again this year. He does a great job rotating his guys. He has his main starters, but for, third down situations, bringing in the pass rushers, changing the guys. But two returners for the interior, at least, that'll probably be starting is Jason Hammond and Anthony Britton. They had a lot of snaps last year behind Jameer Carter, the main starter at defensive tackle. Okay. So they'll get in there. And then, you mentioned a couple of the transfer names coming off the edge from ECU. Zion Wilson, that's a big one for sure. I'm really excited to see.
Him and Britton will be good guys in the D-tackle because they're both wide-bodied guys. So between those two, you should be pretty solid in the middle.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. And there's so many names to get through. I could be here all day. Also returning Billy Godolka. He's hurt right now. He played a little bit last year. He didn't get in much.
I'm not as familiar with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't play much, but he came in late in the season, like a couple times in situations and made plays that were pretty big deals. We'll see if he can get healthy. And then Fisher Kamak is returning, and he plays on the edge. He was pretty good last year, kind of rotated with
He's a former UNLV guy, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. And so I'm excited to see him come back, and he can step up as a leader this year for that team. And then, like you mentioned, Matt Fobbs-White as well could be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, that he's a guy who played for John Summerall at Tulane first, then was Baylor last year, but been a solid player. Then, moving on to linebacker, probably return your bet. Well, arguably, Cam Robinson was either your first or second best, and he's back, so that'll be good.
Yeah. Robinson, of course, he tore his ACL against Duke in the regular season, not the ACC championship. We don't know a timeline, but Coach Elliott sounded very optimistic that he'll be back for the season. And even if he's not, he'll be back during the season if he's not back.
I didn't realize it was that late in the year. I was thinking it was earlier when he went down.
Well, he was actually down early in the season, too. He missed like the first 4 games or so, maybe for 3 games for a completely different injury. So he should be back during the season at some point, and I think I'd argue he was the best he's been the best on the team. He's been at 3. This is going to be his 4th year starting when he comes back. He's such a game changer. He single-handedly won us a couple of games too, with a couple big interceptions or tackles down the stretch. When we played Washington State, he forced a safety for us to get the win. He's so good.
Well, that's right. That game was 22-20. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, it was crazy. It was a crazy game. I think one of the first times that I could remember a game-winning safety almost. It was pretty crazy. Yeah. And then Maddox Marcellus.
James Jackson's done, right?
Jackson, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's gone. Yep. Marcellus is a guy who's returning. He kind of stepped into Cam's role when Cam went down, and he did a good job filling in the void.
Did Marcellus go in the portal, then withdraw?
Yep.
Okay,
yes.
I thought so.
Mm-hmm. That's accurate. Yep. He went in the portal pretty early, and then eventually he withdrew. So him, and then 2 other names. Landon Danley will probably get some time at linebacker, and then a good name, Caleb Hardy. He was formerly a safety. He kind of made the move to linebacker last year, and Coach Elliott was very happy with what he saw in the spring game Saturday from him. So those are your main guys. Then one other guy I'd watch out for is Justin Rowe. He was a freshman. And he's kind of getting some time as a young player now.
Good to know. Rowe's not one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, he's young.
Then D-back, losing Emmanuel Carnley, I thought was a pretty big loss. He was a good player. And then Jason Prevard as well. Carnley's been all over the place. And then Prevard, he ended up at Washington. But you got multiple additions too. Brandon Hillman and Jalen Jones both come in at safety, as does Jalen McNair, who is a good player.
Yeah.
And then at corner, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy that was at Rutgers.
Rutgers.
Is it Harrison?
Jacob Henderson.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
But he played a lot. Played a lot for Rutgers last year. He was a starter. Yeah.
Yep, he did. And so you mentioned some of the names, and a couple of returners too. I'm excited for Corey Costner. He's entering year 2. He had a couple of impactful plays last year as a freshman. And another year 2 guy is Josiah Persinger. And Persinger is an in-state recruit, and he is so fast. He's got a lot of speed. I expect him to get on the field as well. And again, this is another one of those rooms that's so deep. It's such a deep corner and defensive back room. So guys are going to be rotated all over the place until they kind of find that right combination in the fall. And then I also want to mention at safety, Ethan Minter's returning. Minter, This will be his 3rd year, and he's gotten, a lot of experience. He's actually a former he played quarterback in high school, and once he got to the college level, he switched to safety. That. Yeah.
Okay.
He's made the switch pretty well. He's got some good speed.
I knew the name, but I didn't know he came in as a QB. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are kind of the main name. And then of course, Brandon Hillman is what everybody's excited for. He can lay the boom. He has a lot of speed. We saw a small sample size the other day. And then one other corner as well. I almost forgot. Donovan Platt is returning. He's one of our top corners last year. He'll be returning this year.
He was another guy who on my list had said he graduated, like with those D linemen I had mentioned.
This will be year 5. So
okay, who I believe started at, it was either Army or Navy, one of the service academies he originally was at.
Oh, I'm blanking. It was Army.
I thought it was Army. Okay, I knew it was one of the 2 service or one of the 2 out east service academies.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Jalen McNair as well. You mentioned McNair. I'm excited for McNair. He had an interception in the spring game.
So we'll get into a list I did about the ACC in a little bit, but my MAC one came out yesterday, so I was doing some diving into Buffalo. And McNair obviously was one of their better defenders last year. So
definitely.
But that's a lot of turnover on that roster, but I think largely positive. We mentioned a lot of good guys they brought in. So, in looking at last year to this year, last year finished 11-3, far outpacing, expectations. What are your hopes coming into 2026? What would a goal be, for you?
Yeah. Obviously, you want to win, I'd say at the very least 8 games. And again, this is a bit of an easier schedule, I think, compared to some of the other ACC teams. The hope is you do what you did last year. But the problem is it's so tough to sustain that kind of success when you have so much roster turnover. You have a whole new locker room. But I like what you mentioned about both coordinators being back. That was a big plus the year before as well. You kind of keep that continuity at least, and you do have some returners. I think the team is capable of going back to the ACC championship again this year, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I think they could probably a cap of 10 wins. It kind of depends on where those losses come. You never know how good Florida State's going to be. They're so inconsistent.
Yeah.
But it's in Tallahassee this year, which poses a small bit more of a challenge than normal. James Franklin led Virginia Tech Hokies. God only knows how that experiment's going to go over in Blacksburg.
And they're a team. I would rather play them early in the year, and you play them the last game of the year.
Yeah,
so,
every year, because the further we go, the better they're going to get, the more they're going to find themselves, and that's going to be in Blacksburg, and that place is going to be rocking with Enter Sandman. Probably going to be a night game, maybe.
I'm sure,
and that's going to be a tough one.
I think it'll be after game 3. if you say we're after the third game, if you guys have beaten both NC State and West Virginia, we're going to be feeling really good about this team.
We're going to be feeling good.
Because NC State, like you said, you're going to have CJ Bailey, and I expect WVU to get a lot better in Rich Rod year 2. And they brought in Cam Cook from Jacksonville State, one of the better portal running backs. So that team will at least be running the ball well. And you knock off those two, then you're going in,
conference play.
But we mentioned that tough stretch of 4 at Florida State, Syracuse, at SMU, Duke. I mean, if you've taken care of business before then, and you even go 2-2 in that stretch of 4, you're going to have a good chance to go to the ACC title game.
Certainly, for sure. Yeah, that kind of not quite matches, but last year we kind of had a stretch of schedule when we played Florida State, Louisville in the same 2 weeks, and then I'm blanking on who but regardless, we're like, if we could just win
Washington State was the week after.
Okay. Well, our main thing was if we could just win one of these two, just win one of Florida State or Louisville, you're kind of in a good spot. We wanted that NC State game so bad last year. We couldn't quite get it at the end. Chandler Morris threw an interception. I think you're right. If you take care of business early, then you build momentum. It's like a snowball sort of. I'm
blanking on the history. Why did you guys play NC State in a non-con game? I don't remember how that came about.
It's confusing, but basically because the ACC added those teams out west, it made like an odd number of games, and so you kind of had to play another conference game that was a non-conference game. It was really weird.
Because I know the other scenario that happened 2 years was Utah and Baylor, because they had agreed to a non-con. Well, then Utah joined the Big 12, so they still kept their schedule just as a non-conference game in week 2.
Yeah, this is such a weird situation, and they needed another non-conference game. Both teams did, so they just played each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, I would hate that, but
I don't care for it. But
glad that's in. And isn't so NC State we talked about in Brazil, the West Virginia game, is that in the Panthers Stadium or the Titans? Yes. It's an NFL stadium.
Yep, it's in Charlotte. It'll be in the Duke's Mayo Classic or whatever it is. September the 26th, I want to say. It's one of those late September weeks.
19th, week before that.
19th. Yeah. You're correct. That's in the Panthers Stadium, which I'm kind of traumatized from that stadium right now. I went there for the ACC championship, and you fall so short.
One of my most cherished moments is Shane Beamer getting dumped with mayonnaise after a bowl win in that stadium. So
that's really great. That's really great.
But the schedule, it's certainly tougher than last year, but I don't think it's all. At Florida State, who knows how much better they'll be.
Nobody knows.
Have to imagine they improve. Syracuse at home, and I think Syracuse is the inverse of you guys last year, where you guys, most things went right. Syracuse was pretty good until Angeli got hurt. Then they couldn't move the ball at all and were god-awful.
Yeah.
I think they were artificially bad because Fran Brown couldn't get a backup quarterback. I don't know that mistake happens again. We'll see.
I think you're correct. That's a really intriguing game on the schedule because we don't really know what way that game's going to go. And then you also wonder, Cal's coming into town. Nobody knows with that whole, everything going on with them and kind of changing. Yeah. You just never know.
Sagapau Lutele's back, but Lupoy's the head coach now.
Yeah.
I do like that Rolovich is the O coordinator. I do think he's a heck of a coach.
Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things, kind of like Virginia. Last year, if you saw Virginia on the schedule, you're probably thinking a win for the most part or a winnable game. For all we know, we could be saying winnable game for some of these teams, and they're completely flipping this year. So it's so tough to tell.
Yes. The other one, too, at SMU will be a battle. They're going to be a good team next year. I don't expect them to fall off anytime soon with Lashley. Jennings is pretty good, and they have a lot of resources there.
Seriously,
so, they're going to be a competitive team.
That's such a fun story for college football, from them going from Group of 5 to the ACC, and they're really playing at the top level every single year in the ACC.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah. and what's Duke is after that. And Duke is another one. I'm a big Manny Diaz fan. I mean, he's shown us he's a heck of a coach. So losing Mensa obviously is going to hurt them. But Walker Egan was a good QB at San Jose State. They brought in. They're another one, though. If Duke was as good as they were last year, I would be surprised.
I know. I'm really intrigued. That Mensah situation really messed them.
It did. At Wake will be a tough game. I think Jake Dickert's a very good coach, too. I know.
I like Wake.
He won at Wazoo Dave Clawson was a really good coach and really elevated them from years and years of being terrible. They did go stale in the end, and I think it was the right time to move on. But Dickert is a good coach, and I think Gio Lopez is going to be a good QB there, back with his Rob Ezell, who was his O coordinator at South Alabama when they were pretty legit the year before.
Certainly, yeah. They were a good story last year, too. They were kind of overshadowed by Virginia and some of these other ACC schools, but they had a really good turnaround.
Yeah. And they'll be a team next year. And I was looking at their schedule early on is kind of a gauntlet, but then it eases up quite a bit. So, I mean, I think they played Purdue out of conference, but then you open up Miami, Louisville, NC State, our ACC opener.
That's brutal.
And, yeah.
That's
yeah. But then it gets better after that because Cal, Merrimack, Georgia Tech, not as bad. So, and I don't know what to expect from Tech next year. They've been well with Key, but you lost Faulkner, the O coordinator, and similar to a situation we've talked about with Vanderbilt on some of my shows with. How much was Pavia elevating you? Well, how much was Haynes King elevating Tech for the last couple of years? We'll see.
Think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with Virginia, one of the things I did in my writing with Mike Farrell, I did. I'm doing a series with every conference called Coldest to Hottest, where I'm ranking every head coach from, in the ACC's case, 17 would be the coldest seat, which is Jeff Brom, to number 1, the hottest seat, Mike Norvell. And just wanted to run that, by you. These are my rankings. Feel free to pick anything apart and scold me if you want to, but it's a good thought process. But Brom, I think, is super safe. He's, the Golden Boy returned home after being one of the only coaches to ever win games at Purdue. I will say the guy I'll, mention specifically for you, Elliott at 9, might seem higher on the list than we would have expected. And I'll say with him, the guys below him have had, a few of them had very long tenures. The other ones are just in good situations. But with Elliott, we've really only had one good year. And if he has a second good year, I think he becomes very safe. But anybody with just the one good year, you can very much be in flux if they regress this year.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's a really cool concept that you came up with.
It's why Fran Brown is 8, because he had one very good first year. Then they were terrible last year.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that we worry about coming up this upcoming year. I think it's a very fair assessment because you got to think if Virginia didn't win the games they did last year, Elliott was going to be out the door 100%. I don't know what the threshold would have been. If he didn't make a bowl game, he'd have been out. Even with 7 wins, it'd have been a bit questionable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he's safe now. He just signed a contract extension. But still, you got to see that consistency. You saw it for 1 year. Now you're getting a tiny bit tougher of a schedule, and I'm sure that the coming years will be even tougher. I think it's a very fair assessment.
Okay.
I agree with Jeff Brom. I think he's, he's not going anywhere.
He's
And
writing his
Manny
own
Diaz,
check at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, and Manny Diaz, winning the ACC championship for Duke last year was just magnificent for them, for their sake. They seemed like they were out of it so many times throughout the season, and then they found a way. And then Dabo.
I am gonna. Oh, go
go
for it. You're talking about Dabo.
Well, I was just gonna say Dabo. He's not gonna be let go. If he's gonna go, it's gonna be on his terms.
and Dabo, it's interesting with Dabo because before the last year or two, for a decade, he would have been the safest guy on this list. But I don't think he is anymore.
No, I think you're correct.
And the Jake, Dickert, we both, we're talking about and praising Dickert at 14. I will be very curious after this year if Jake Dickert, if Wake has another decent year, if he goes back home and is the next head coach at Wisconsin. I could see Jake Dickert being that guy.
That'd be a good opportunity for him.
Yeah.
And I agree with Norvell being the hottest. He kind of already was on the hot seat. Arguably could have been gone after last year, but the staff there giving him another chance, and then Belichick. I mean, my goodness, what
a disaster!
Yeah, seriously.
You wonder if are there boosters and admin kicking themselves in the ass for that experiment?
Oh my goodness, yeah. The only thing is I don't know what his buyout would be. I know it's not cheap, but
I would imagine not. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's about all. I think it's an interesting list, and I think Mario Cristobal, he's got to prove. He got to the championship game, so that was good. But you also had some stupid losses in the season that happened that you shouldn't be having as Miami. So I think it's and I think the ACC, while it's not the best, I'll be the first to admit it's not a top 2 conference. It's either third or fourth with the Big 12. I think it's one of the most fun conferences, though, as far as to keep track of. I mean, look at the chaos that happened last year. The tiebreakers weren't necessarily in the best spots, but it's a very competitive league. Every team can be in it in almost any year. You saw Virginia shoot up last year. Wake Forest is starting to get good again, like they were back when they were in the Atlantic competing with Clemson. And Clemson hasn't been ruling the world the last couple of years, so it's allowing these other teams to step up and have a lot of good competition.
And we're only a couple years removed from Pitt being in that game.
Yeah.
So and both, Narduzzi, Dorn at 11-12, both guys that have been there for a decade and won a lot of games, who they haven't been elite, but they've been very stable and had good cultures there.
Yeah, certainly. And even last year, Pitt kind of soared up late in the season, made things really interesting for sure. Especially playing Georgia Tech. That was a really fun football game. I think I agree. I mean that, and then Dorian with NC State. I mean NC State could have been right there if they didn't choke a little bit early in the season.
I know.
And like I said earlier, CJ Bailey's such a great versatile quarterback. They've got such a good core there. And even last year, the running back room, I remember previewing that NC State game like, man, there's just weapons on weapons on weapons with this NC State team. And I think they could certainly, be good again next year.
No, I think you're right about that. And, we mentioned Fran Brown had the big regression last year after the QB injury. Mario and Rhett Lashley, for me, kind of in the same boat. Because, Mario, they went to the national title last year, and Lashley went to the playoffs 2 years ago. But both at Miami and SMU, you do not have a grace period. If you regress and have a bad year, you will risk being fired. They expect so much right now, and anything short of the playoff will be considered a disappointment.
I think you're correct. Yeah, Cristobal. I mean, if Miami doesn't make the playoffs, I think that's it for him. And he was kind of already on the hot. If he didn't go to the championship last year, he was kind of on the hot seat.
They had been very underwhelming up until like in his time, they were unable to win the big games. They would always kind of like James Franklin near the end at Penn State, where you just weren't you were consistently winning 8, 9, 10 games, but you weren't winning the ones the fans really wanted to win.
Yeah, and that's what I'm really curious about with Franklin at Virginia Tech. If that's kind of the Virginia game's a big one for Virginia Tech. At the end of every season, the Commonwealth Cup, is I'm not just speaking as a rival fan. I'm just speaking in general.
No.
Franklin couldn't get it done at Penn State in the big game. Yeah. Is that going to level down to Virginia Tech?
And with all the buzz and people loving on him and he's, things he's done to the roster, he has done all that. But if that doesn't result in on-field wins right away, he won't last too long. The fans will turn on him quick if it's the same old that he was doing at Penn State.
Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had Pritchard, the new hire at Stanford, at 4. I'll be honest. I didn't really know how to rank him. I did not like the hire at all. To me, it was a very uninspired move. And I felt like he just got kind of hired because he was, a buddy and had played there. But Frank Reich, he was just the 1-year guy. We knew he was going to be interim for a year.
That was so weird. You don't really hire interims in college football.
I know. And actually winning 4 games there was better than I expected to because our roster wasn't very good last year. Yeah. But he took over from Taylor, who wasn't great, but had the scandal in any case. But really with Stanford, David Shaw was elite there for a little bit. He was really, really bad his last 4 or 5 years. Ever since COVID and after, they were not good in the David Shaw years. So that's a team who, not only under one coach, but really 3 of them. So in Shaw's last 4 years, they won 4, 4, 3, and 3. And then he was gone. They've totally lost their identity and culture from what they were. And Stanford has to get that back. If they don't get it back, I wonder how long of a grace period Pritchard has. I think that's why I put him 4, higher than I normally would for a new head coach.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, for sure.
So, and then, I was saying, I was blanking on my own list about it was O'Brien, Bill. Oh, we haven't talked about Bill O'Brien, who I think is a very good coach. They were just terrible last year. I don't know why BC just didn't get a little better. I mean, they were 2-10 last year. 7-6 his first year. They made a bowl game, lost to Nebraska in his first year in a bowl game. But then
the year before with Tommy Castellanos, before he left for FSU, they beat Florida State early in the season. They were 4-0 before they played Virginia, and Virginia beat them at home when they were 4-0. I don't know if they were ranked number 24 or 25 or if they were just not ranked. I can't remember, but that kind of created a down spiral. I'm really, because O'Brien, I think he's a good football coach too. And at the same time, it's Boston College. You don't have the most resources in the world. It's not an easy job.
No. And it is definitely one of those schools where maybe similar to, me coming from Minnesota with the Gophers, you're always kind of going to be little brother to the NFL team in town that's a way bigger. Georgia Tech's in the same boat where the NFL just dwarfs you in that city.
Yeah, so, I agree.
Yeah. But, looking at the ACC going into this next year, I'll just kind of spitfire a few questions. If you were picking right now, who would you expect would be the 2 teams in the ACC title game?
Well, I'll say the easy answer. Miami's one of them.
I think they have to be with Mensa. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've got so much talent, and Cristobal coming off of going to the playoffs and going to the championship. You just have to. And the thing is people pick Miami every year, and they never end up there, or not always end up there. But it's hard not to pick them. So I think Miami's one of them. I think that second spot is so open. I even think it pains me to say this, even Virginia Tech with James Franklin, if he can bring them out the depths, they could be there. I think Virginia could absolutely make another run to potentially be there. I don't think I see Duke in there this year.
I think Louisville's conference schedule isn't as bad. They're gonna.
I was about to say.
Them. You might lose because they play both Ole Miss and Kentucky, but they're non-con games, so it doesn't matter for the conference title. And they have SMU early. It's weird that week 3 game, Louisville SMU could have significant implications for the conference title game because both those teams are going to have a shot.
Absolutely. I was going to say Louisville is a big one and SMU is a big one, and Jennings being back. I mean, that's both of those teams I really think, and I mentioned this earlier, I really think it's a competitive league. And it's a very fun, because maybe the teams aren't here with Alabama and the SECs of the world, but they're all on the same, the upper half can all, there's a lot of teams that I think could make a run for that second ACC title game spot.
Is Stanford going to be the worst team in the conference? I feel like that's probably a safe bet.
Them or Boston College.
Yeah, because I don't think Syracuse will be as bad as they were. The wild card for me down at that end, I don't know how the Tar Heels are going to be. Like, Petrino's a very good O coordinator, but they were such a nightmare last year at UNC. And then, as much as I think he's a good coach, Arkansas was terrible when he became the interim. Now, granted, it was because their defense couldn't tackle anybody. But
that doesn't help. I know. I'm so curious. North Carolina, the conference is better when North Carolina is good, and it's more fun to watch. But Belichick, he's still adapting to that college landscape from pro, and there's a lot like last year. I had no idea what to expect from them. The exact same this year. My intuition is with the fact that they were terrible last year. They won't be any better this year, but you never know. Some staff changes, and now Belichick has had a year to adapt. So it's so tough to know.
That week 0, the day you guys play in Brazil, North Carolina plays TCU in Ireland.
Yeah,
which they're the
big game.
The Aer Lingus opener. Yes,
and they played last year to open up the year, and you remember that first drive North Carolina had.
Yep,
they scored, and everybody in the world thought, "Oh my goodness, North Carolina might be a playoff contender," and they looked like it, and then it all went downhill after that. So,
and their schedule, their first 6 weeks of the season is a bear. So you got TCU, then you have an FCS game. Clemson, Notre Dame, at Pittsburgh, at Duke. That's a tough opener for the Tar Heels because North Carolina's going to roll. Notre Dame's going to roll them. And
for sure.
Clemson, I'm actually really surprised. I'm lower on Clemson. I don't think that Vizina is going to be a decent QB. I'm shocked. Well, if it was anybody else, I'd be shocked they didn't get a good QB in the portal. With Dabo, I don't know if you can be shocked that he didn't do that.
Yeah.
But to me, it was an error on their part to not address that position in the portal. Even if you don't want to pay and get one of the studs, at least get a guy that's played that could compete for the job.
Yeah.
Like a Holstein type guy who has started and been okay, but it's not the worst thing in the world if he comes on the roster and doesn't get the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. So, I think I would probably go Miami and Louisville if I was. I know it's the most unoriginal and uninspiring.
But I get it
in the world. But
I get it. But Louisville's consistently towards the top of the conference every year, and then Miami, they're not consistently towards the top of the conference, but they're consistently a very good roster, a consistent coaching staff who can win football games. Just a matter of if they have a couple fluke games like last year where they lose. Like they weren't even in the ACC title game last year, but they got to the national championship. So
I always ask people, and this kind of goes back to the graphic I was showing, which coach in the conference is on the hottest seat? Do you agree that it's Mike Norvell with me, or do you have a differing opinion?
I agree. It's Mike Norvell. I think so. It just
it's tough to argue anybody else.
Yeah, he had such a good year, that undefeated season, and then that I mean, the playoff snub was the worst thing to happen to them. I guess they just were never. They looked so good when they beat Alabama last year, and then Virginia beat them, and that was it for them. They started down spiraling all season long, but I hear they have a good roster again. We'll see what they can do.
And I wasn't as big of I thought they'd do better at QB than Ashton Daniels, but maybe he'll be all right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to watch. I can assure you, though, once they lose that first game, the fan base is going to scream for Norvell's head. Scream for it.
They might. Yeah. I think they open. I know they played Bama, or their schedule. Boy, we could see a one. They open up against New Mexico State, which they should win. Then they got SMU and at Alabama in weeks 2 and 3. That's tough.
That's very at Alabama. You said. Whew, that's
yeah. They go to Bryant-Denny next year.
Yeah, I mean, I if they lose that game, that's not the end of it for Norvell. But you definitely want to put a competing team on the field, and you want to look like you belong.
Yeah, and after Bama, then you have your FCS game, but then you have Virginia at Louisville, at Miami, Clemson at home.
Forget about it.
It's a tough schedule.
Forget about it at that point.
That's a tough schedule.
And Norvell's a great guy, but I don't think with that kind of schedule, it's not really in your favor. It doesn't really help your cause at all.
And he is a guy, I think, because of the success he's had, he does bounce back. Like, maybe he wants to go be an assistant at another school. Okay. I think he gets a G6 head job right away, though, if he wants one, because how well he did at Memphis.
And he'll lead really well there whenever he gets it. Yes. Almost like a with JMU now with oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Florida's coach.
Billy Napier.
Yeah. I think a very similar situation. Funny enough, Florida, but a very similar situation for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100% there. Yeah. But like, say Memphis goes on a heater with Charles Huff, and they could because he's a good coach, and he bolts, which he is no stranger to taking other jobs. Memphis would take Norvell back, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Why not?
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I always ask, and this is a little more of a thinker, and I'll show you the graphic after, but which coach in the conference do you think with a good season is the most likely to get a blue blood job or a job at a top school?
Ooh, that's a great question. Oh man. Well, I'll tell you one. I really do believe James Franklin is one of them. Because I don't, even if he's successful at Virginia Tech, I don't think he'll be there for long, because if he is successful, he's going to go to the SEC or go back to the Big Ten somewhere.
Okay.
And if he's not successful, they'll turn on him, like you said. So I think Franklin is absolutely one of them. But then also even Jake Dickert, maybe.
I had said Dickert with the Wisconsin one before. Yeah. He certainly could be my answer.
I really don't think Tony Elliott will go anywhere if he has another great season, to be honest with you. I think he really loves Virginia.
If he keeps doing decent, does he leave for Clemson when Dabo retires?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, he's an alumni there. It makes a lot of sense that he would.
Yeah, he played there and he coached there for a long time as a coordinator. I think absolutely. I think it's possible. I think it also, it's situation based. What things are doing at Virginia. Are they winning national championships? Which, by the way, I say no. I'm not out here saying Virginia's going to be winning national championships. But if you're having national success, it makes it a little bit more. I think that's absolutely
Dickert, though, for me is a guy that's an option there. And even though they were terrible last year, before last season, I would have said Fran Brown is in that discussion because of how well he did at Georgia. He was with Kirby. If they get back, things go, in the right direction, Fran Brown could be that guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe not after this year, but after the following year. If he can do it for 2 years in a row.
I think it takes him 2 more at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if he can do it for 2 years in a row, absolutely.
Yeah. And you also wonder, I think a variable in that case is, would you leave an ACC job for a middle-of-the-road Big Ten job or middle-of-the-road SEC job? Why I say those 2 jobs, because would Fran Brown go to Maryland if Loxley's out? And Manny Diaz, former DC at Mississippi State, if things don't get better with Levy, would Manny leave for Mississippi State? They're interesting questions because of the spending power in the Big Ten and SEC.
I think you're correct. I think Diaz would leave. He's also one that I think would go, even if it's not Mississippi State. I think if he got offered, a big time SEC, even like, any of those big time schools, I think he'd be willing to go and lead a big program. I don't think, in the Fran Brown situation, I think he would leave. I don't know about Maryland though. Maryland is so in the dumps now, not necessarily in the dumps, but at the bottom of the barrel with the Big Ten. It just doesn't make much sense anymore for them. So far from, I know regions don't really matter anymore with conferences, but it just doesn't make much sense at the Big Ten.
Yeah,
they haven't really had their way.
The one I wonder with Fran Brown, and he's a New Jersey guy. Schiano isn't going anywhere anytime soon. They love him there. I don't know that Brown would go to Rutgers. An interesting one, though, in a place he coached before. When I did the Big 12 article, my hottest seat was Dave Aranda. I don't know that he makes it after this year. Brown coached at Baylor for a bit. They got a decent amount of money down there. You wonder if they'd make a run at Fran Brown, and would he leave for the Big 12? I don't know the answer.
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer either. I think he likes Syracuse, but again, when you throw money,
it seems like he does. Yeah.
Yeah. But money talks. I mean, think about Lane Kiffin, for example.
Yeah.
Money
absolutely.
talks.
Yeah. No, you're right about that.
It's his own reality TV show.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, with doing a lot of stuff with Steve, our Ole Miss guy, I'm well in the trenches with that one. But anything else you want to bring up, or I know we're a little over an hour now, Jack. Anything else you want to talk about, or you'd like to say to the audience, or ask me?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. I think Virginia is another really interesting team this year. They got it done last year, like you said. It's a matter of can you sustain success now, and that's something that Elliott's already talked about. How he's talking to the locker room. We know how to get there now, so how can we sustain it? And he does a really good job with the team chemistry. Everybody seems to be bought in. So it's going to be really interesting. And again, like you said, a bit of a favorable schedule. But I would say definitely for the average ACC fan or the average college football fan to watch out. I do think Virginia will be over par. I'd say 8 to 9 wins. I haven't done my official prediction yet. I'll have to look. That'll come closer to the fall.
When I actually see what
Oh, with the over-under? I don't even remember. I should already know, but I forgot.
We looked at the SEC ones a while back, but I haven't. 7.5 for Virginia.
I would take over. I would take the over. And it's –
yeah.
I would take the over.
I think I would too, but that's the right number. Because if it was 8.5, I would probably say under. 6.5, I'm definitely going the over. So that tells me that's probably where it should be. Keeping in mind the whole idea of that number is Vegas wants 50% of the bettors on each side. So
if it was 8.5, I probably wouldn't touch it. Well, first of all, I wouldn't touch it anyways as a Virginia fan, but 8.5, I definitely wouldn't, because I wouldn't take over 8.5, but I also wouldn't count them out to go under. I would go over, I'd go over 7.5. But it's going to be a fun year.
To me, 7-5. So to go under 7-5, that's probably the worst case scenario.
Yes.
And you rarely want to bet on either the worst or best case scenario happening. Exactly. Somewhere in the middle is likely to happen.
Yep.
Which hits you the over in most cases. Yeah.
Yep. So, I think it's going to be a fun season. And I really, I love to say this and hate to say this. I think a lot is going to come down to that final game of the season when you play at Blacksburg, at Virginia Tech, at James Franklin. Probably a night game with Enter Salmon rocking. It's going to be a very big time matchup. And man, if you can get that done, I mean, Lord knows, what the ACC standings will shape up to be this year. And you never know. Maybe, they got screwed out of they didn't get screwed. They screwed themselves out of a playoff spot last year. Maybe with another good season, you can find a way. You'll get a little bit more, not biased, but a little bit more attention from the voters this year from the AP polls. Now that you sowed that's last year.
I think so.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I'm glad you could be here, and I'll tag you and, both personally and then your Cavalier Connection so our viewers can give you an easy follow. And thanks for being here, and I look forward to talking with you, as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.